I was browsing videos the other day and came across a video on the TV show The View. I think this particular video was a year or more old, but the guest on that program was Star Parker. And if you don't know Star Parker, she is a black conservative Christian. Her testimony is she lived a very simple life. She lived in the projects. She was on welfare. But she got saved. She became a Christian. She turned her life around. And now she is a conservative Christian. She does a lot of speaking engagements. She writes for conservative news outlets. But the topic that day was family values. And Joyce Bayer asked her, well, what about same-sex marriages? And Star Parker had to educate these liberals on The View about the biblical definition of a family. And to my amazement, Elizabeth Hasselbeck, who called herself a Christian and quoted scripture, said that she struggled with not accepting same-sex marriages. And I was just simply amazed. She is a very weak, a very ignorant, or a phony Christian, just as she's a very weak conservative. I did a video on her a few weeks ago after the election in which I showed that she was very weak and a very pathetic conservative. And I think she is just a token conservative sitting on that show just so that they can say that they are fair and that they are balanced. But I don't think she is a true conservative. Now, she knows the guest lists that are coming on that show, and it would seem as if she should have an answer. If she calls herself a Christian and a conservative, she should have an answer for the topics and the questions that come on that show. And if she is a conservative or a Christian, it should come from a conservative or Christian view. If a person calls themselves a Christian, how is it that they do not have any kind of interest or desire to know God? And how do you get to know God? You go to the Bible that tells how He is, and you would find out His position and what He thinks about issues. Instead of struggling, you should already know that, especially if you're going to be on that show and presenting that view. Just take a listen or take a look at this.
Say, I am not only conservative, I'm right wing.
What do you think about gay marriage?
No, that would be
right. That's a family value when two people love each other and they get married.
But that's not what family is. When you talk about,
why not?
Well, now let's take biblical worldview versus secular worldview, and that's probably the struggle we're having in our society today. Those that come from a biblical worldview say, I believe that these 10 things I should try to live up to. Well, when it says honor your father and your mother, he's talking about a household here. When Jesus says, for this reason a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife, we're talking about family development. And the people that come from a biblical worldview have to take that seriously.
But there are things in the Bible. There are things in the Bible that
you have to take all of it seriously.
As a Christian too, as a Christian woman, that's something that I oftentimes struggle with, because I think, okay, the first law of the Bible is love the Lord your God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. Love is the ultimate, I think, law in terms of the Bible. So I see that as, okay, loving another person truly for who they are. I don't see anything better than that. So that is one thing.
But that's also New Testament. That's something else.
As you can see there, they ganged up on Star Parker. And Elizabeth Hasselbeck should have been there supporting Star Parker and answering these questions instead of expressing struggle with not accepting same-sex marriages. And they bombarded Star after that, asking her questions about birth control, evolution, and all kinds of things. And she really did not get the chance to adequately answer that question that Elizabeth Hasselbeck asked. And to answer that question, Elizabeth, you got it partially right. You quoted the right scripture. You love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and body. And then you love your neighbor as yourself. You love God first, though. You listen to what He said, what His opinion is, what His position on the issue is. God said homosexuality is an abomination to Him. He is the one who set up marriage between one man and one woman. You cannot go contrary to that. You love God by following his ways. His ways are supposed to be your ways. You follow him. You don't love a neighbor above God. You value God's opinion first. And on top of that, love, true love, to anyone who is in sin, homosexual sin or any other kind of sin, true love is warning that person about that sin, that sin is going to end them up in an eternal hell. That's true love, is trying to warn people and stop them from spending eternity in hell. That's true love. And that should be your view. If you call yourself a Christian, God's views should be your views. Not only do I think that Elizabeth Hasselbeck is a weak or phony conservative, she is much the same when it comes to Christianity. And she calls herself a Christian. If she spent as much time in the Bible trying to get to know God as she does in beauty, fashion, and entertainment and Hollywood, and worrying about whether she's going to get an invitation to one of the White House parties, then she will be able to answer these questions. How in the world, if you say you're a Christian, how is it that you have no desire and no interest in learning about God and finding out his ways? The Bible tells what his ways are, what his positions are. And if you're going to call yourself a Christian, if you're going to call yourself a conservative, you need to follow what God says. Not sit around and struggle with what he said. Especially if you're going to be on this show and it is your job to give your position, and you're claiming to have the position of a conservative and a Christian. Star Parker is right. The main struggle in this society today is, are we going to have a biblical worldview, or are we going to have a secular worldview? Everything comes down to that.